Today, I am willing to accept the truth about me. Today, I will rise and allow the light in me to shine upon the world today. I'm going to say that again. Today, I am willing to accept the truth about me. I will arise in glory and allow the light in me to shine upon the world today. Well, beautiful people here at Unity of Denver, this is my mandate. This is from A Course in Miracles. I'm not really a student of the Course, but that line is my personal mandate. And I consider that wherever I find myself seems to be my assignment for that day. So I'm so glad I'm here. I'm glad for this assignment here with you to celebrate Sunday with you, to celebrate our divine identity. I want to express my gratitude for the invitation. And I want to say to you, if you haven't noticed, you have an exquisite spiritual community here under the direction of a man I very much respect as a Unity leader, your spiritual leader, David. There's another quotation that I live by these days that has been another personal mandate, and it's one that the prayer chaplains heard yesterday from Charles Fillmore. Charles Fillmore said, and this was almost 100 years ago, he said, "It is your duty. It is your duty to express all that you can imagine God to be." He said, "This is your standard. Let this be your standard. Never lower it. Never allow yourself to be belittled by the cry of sacrilege. You can aspire, you can attain anything you can imagine. If you can imagine it is true of God, it must be true of you." Okay. Okay, my heart says. And then I go out in the world and I bump up against what it means to have to stand like that, to accept the truth about me, to be willing to allow the light in me to shine, to know that all that God is I am meant to be. Doesn't that sound a little blasphemous? In the world around us, it is definitely blasphemous. And I believe it takes a good, healthy dose of spiritual gumption or divine audacity in order to begin that journey. How many of you have found yourself sort of on an edge of where your family, your first family, where your friends, where your schoolmates had been spiritually, and find it's a little bit challenging to be all that, to even agree to be all that? Anybody? Oh, good. I'm really glad. And now, for me, what I realize is that it's really one thing to say that, to hear these lofty, wonderful ideals, to imagine myself in my godness. It's another thing entirely to accept it in the everyday moments of my life, to be able to bring it on. You know what I mean? It's another matter altogether. And I have found in my own life, and I've found it absolutely as I support other people in claiming their divine identity, I have found that it's the biggest challenge of us is to simply accept it. To accept that this is the truth about me. I can see it in you. I see your divine love. I see the wisdom you emanate. I see you as godness. Do I see it in me? It's a lot harder. It's a lot harder to see it, and I believe there's reasons for that. Very logical reasons. I think it's the way we were raised primarily. I take myself as a great example of somebody who was raised to know my place in my first family. When I was young, there was no room for audacity. divine or otherwise. No room, right? So I was raised in a little enclave, a little Italian Catholic family. Now, if you are one of them, I don't need to say another word, you know? So this little neighborhood in Philadelphia, Italian Catholic, there were some Irish Catholics too. That was about as diverse as we got. And in that family, from a very young age, one of 7 children, a very good Catholic couple, yes, I was raised to know my place in the world. In that family, I knew what I was to do and not do. I grew up a very good girl. Being a good girl was like, that's when you got the gold star, you know, the little sisters in my school. You know, you didn't want to get slapped by the ruler. You wanted a gold star. So I learned to be a good girl, to do what I was told, to be obedient, to not make waves. So it was as surprising to me as anybody else that when I got into high school, my parents made one mistake. They let me out of the house. Because the moment I had access to a world beyond my neighborhood, I learned something. I learned that my religion wasn't the only religion. Holy cow, I had no idea. Not only that, but not every family ate pasta on Tuesday and fish on Friday. Because literally every other family I knew did. This blew my mind. And it was only the beginning of my mind being blown, and only the beginning of me feeling that the tether I had to that little safe nest of my first family was beginning to break apart. And so I was the one in my very, very conforming, conventional family. I was the oldest girl, and you know, being the first daughter of an Italian papa, man, it was not easy being me, because I was supposed to be a very compliant daughter, right? And wait around for a man to love me and take care of me and all this stuff. So when I left home in college, I came back about a year later wearing a sari and the little tilak on my forehead, chanting Hare Krishna, and they thought I dropped in from outer space, literally. I went and lived at a yoga ashram for 3 years, changed my life. Now, how did I have the audacity for that? I have no idea. I know that for me, it didn't feel like I was being audacious in the least. It felt like a truth for me. It felt like everything in me was drawn to a path of deepening spiritually. And so I had to do it. I had to. I said to my parents, I have to do this. And they're like, oh, I don't know about you. So, you know, I didn't stop there. Unfortunately for my mom and dad, I gave them quite a hard time, you know. So this little compliant girl did other things too. So I come back after 3 years at Kripalu Ashram, and I reconnected with a college sweetheart of mine that my parents had never met for one good reason. I come home to invite my parents into our very own Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. Yes, when my husband of African descent and I decided to marry, my father, that was too much for Dad. He disowned me that very day. That very day. Probably you can imagine, and maybe you've had these experiences in your own life, when that divine audacity of you, when all that you know about yourself leads you to make a decision that is not in harmony with other people in your life. And you have to decide, do I just be the good girl still? Do I do what Daddy wants? Or do I follow my heart? I chose to follow my heart. It was the most painful and freeing decision of my life. You can imagine it was both of those things, right? So all of that to be said, there's more to that story you'll hear in a few minutes. But then, years later, I come back. I have 2 children now and all this stuff. I come back and tell my parents or tell my mom, I'm going to be an ordained Unity minister. Oh my gosh. Well, the floor dropped out for Mom, and she didn't disown me, but she certainly did not celebrate with me. So, friends, I come by personal experience into this conversation with you today about living an audacious life. None of those actions I took, none of those choices I made came from a place of wanting to stick it to my parents. You get that, right? All of that came from me feeling a call to be in a greater way, a greater me. A greater shining of the light that's inside of me. It was compelling. It was everything I needed. And I don't regret one thing about it today. So I had no idea I could eventually stand up in front of a group of people and talk out loud about my life. But I want you to know something. Your hearing my biography was not for your entertainment. It's not. I don't want you to say on your way out, I really enjoyed that. No, I'm not here to entertain. I'm here because something in you knows this story. Something in you. Either it knows the story already of your own life, or that story is still unfolding, and you've got a choice on the horizon for you. You will need to decide what you're going to bring to that. What's the force of your life pushing you toward, moving you in the direction of? And what does that mean? Because there seems to be a cost for being divinely audacious. There seems to be a cost. It costs everything. And yet, it brings everything. Because here's what I know, that every one of us is sort of like a geode. You know what a geode is? Oh, here in the Rockies, you know what a geode is, right? Okay, they're a picture of a geode. Can you put that picture of the first slide up there? Oh, the other one. Yeah, that one. Okay, so what does it look like? It's just a rock. It just looks like a rock. Well, that's you and me. We're just this crust. And you know, the crust on the outside of us is just the gathering of all of our experiences, all the messages we've received and internalized about ourselves through the years. You know, I'm a good girl. That was a message that was predominant in my life, and that kept me as a very young girl doing everything that I thought I was supposed to do. You know, that crust is all the self-definitions that we accumulate throughout the years. It's also the judgments that have come to us. It's like, you know, it's everything. And it gets to be such a thick crust that it doesn't look very distinguished. It doesn't look any different from another rock. It's not shiny and bright. But there it is. That's just the outside. You know how it is, they all look alike. Us humans, we all look alike, right? You see the similarities. But here's the thing about a geode. The geologists consider a geode the Tootsie Roll Pop of nature. Yeah, on the outside it's just this hard crust, but you crack that baby open and you reveal the sweet surprise on the inside. All right. So that sweet surprise, that shimmery, dazzling formations of light crystals, can't see them when you're looking at an unbroken geode. But there it is, the heart of you and me, the part that isn't so visible unless we let our light shine, right? Unless we let out the divine love that is natural to us, unless we see ourselves as all that God is in terms of our spiritual capacities, unless we see spiritual strength and we bring it out of us. Every one of those different formations represents some of our spiritual powers or capacities. And it is the degree to which we have our own view on those capacities and be able to develop and cultivate them and shine the light of them into our world with every choice we make every single day, not just the big stuff. To that degree, we become an outpicturing of the divine that we're so happy to celebrate. So I find that most of us, the challenge is that we just don't see that. We don't see the within of us. We don't see what we truly are. And I find that, frankly, pretty sad. I've had challenges seeing it for myself, but I tell you that I will never again deny the light that I am. Never again will I call myself less than Godness. See, I don't refer to God as a person, so I don't call it God because God sounds like a person. Because God was a person in my life when I was a child. So I call it Godness, so I realize that it's the qualities of the divine that I am, that I have the potential to be, and so do you. And to the degree that we're willing to do that, we can do amazing things. You know, in Unity, we're taught this. We're taught that by the light of our spiritual capacities, we can break down borders and walk right beyond seeming barriers in our life. And that's what I did, you know, when I stepped into Unity ministry. I broke beyond the shell of what I thought was possible for me. In Unity, we're taught that we should, and in fact, we have the mind potential to be able to disregard appearances. How easy is that, to disregard the shell on the outside of things? How easy is that for us? But it's a discipline that we do as a way of being able to get to the inside of us and see the inside of our brother or sister. It's what we do in Unity. It's one of our simplest of spiritual practices. Disregard the appearance of things and get to what's true and real. Look for that sweet surprise on the inside. So we do that, and that's what I had to do. Oh my goodness, do you think it was easy for me to face my father? Difficult. So then we also taught that we are to dream impossible dreams and pursue them. And we learn the skills to do that through the Unity classes that we take. We're also taught, and this is one of my favorites, has had to be, is that we practice a radical, unreasonable, unjustifiable forgiveness. That's what I did with Dad. Totally unreasonable. Totally unjustifiable because I didn't do anything wrong. Forgiveness. We teach that. We practice that here. You think that's audacious? That's audacious. Whew. And the craziest thing of all, the most audacious thing we do is we dare to name ourselves divine. That's crazy in this world today, to call ourselves that. And yet we are. So, friends, to me, that's what divine audacity is all about. That's what the book is about. It's my own awakening to the reality that all that God is, all that I could say about that Godness, I can claim that for myself. And in fact, the degree to which I keep myself apart from it and keep saying, well, not me, I can't be that, oh no, I can't admit that's the truth of me. Why? Because now I have to take responsibility for it, don't I? Now I got to live into that light. Now I got to shine. Holy cow. How am I going to do that? Right? How am I going to do that? But then here I am just doing that, you know? And so are you, and so are you, and so are you. Are you with me? Oh, I'm so glad. And here's the other thing that gives me the clue that we don't accept this about ourselves. The first 2 rows are completely empty except for David. I tell you, when you start to really get it, that you are here to shine a light, that every time you walk into this community, into the doors here, into this community, that you are a representation of all that God is to the degree of your personal realization of it in this moment. And that means you have a light to shine. You have a gift to give to the person who's sitting next to you and trying to shrink. Please don't notice me. Please don't see me. You have an opportunity to be that kind of beaming light so that everybody who comes in here begins to see it in themselves. Isn't that what Jesus did? He stood just as the light of the world. Oh, only that. Only that. just as the light of the world, he stood. And in his presence, other people healed themselves of terrible afflictions. You think that's not possible in your presence? Then you're just not owning it. I'm saying to you, it's possible. Thank you. Thank you, brother. Are you with me? Okay, anybody excited about it? I promise you that when you just say to yourself, okay, I'll admit it, I'm divine. Okay, I'll admit it, divine love is what I am. Okay, I'll admit it, I have a forgiving heart. Okay, I'll admit it. Okay, I'll admit it. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. You know, when we are willing to do that, our whole life changes. Forget the fact that everybody else around us is also transforming, and we'll be so happy to be in the company of others who are like beaming like we are. But there's just absolutely no reason, I say to you, there's no reason, there's no circumstance that you could be experiencing right now that could keep you from being the light of the world. Not one thing keeps you from being the light of the world. The only thing is you saying no. And you don't have to do anything heroic or just be a little ridiculous. Just make a ridiculous decision to reach out to that person that renounced you. Make a decision. So I want to do a little exercise with you before we close, because this is one of the practices of divine audacity. It's one of the practices of spiritual faith, our capacity to shift our perception. That's our faith faculty at work. Do that, what we do with perception is we stop focusing on the outside of things and people. We stop worrying about the rock and thinking there's not much going on there. And instead we focus intently on the inside of things and people. So we see what's really going on and look at the truth of things. So would you indulge me with just a couple of little pictures up on the screen here? This first one is probably a familiar face to most people. So what if you didn't know that this was Dr. Stephen Hawking that you're looking at? What if you met him in his wheelchair on the street somewhere and you had no idea who he was? You might be tempted to feel sorry for him. You might be tempted, I might be tempted to feel, oh, that poor man, shut up in that body that's so not functioning. What would we miss? We'd miss the brilliant futurist and physicist that has changed what we know about life by his brilliant brain. Wouldn't we? We'd miss it. We'd miss the dazzling spiritual being, the light in this particular way that it shines. And that would be too sad for the world not to have had access to his brilliance, don't you think? I really feel that. So this next picture is more, there was another one before that. Another one, the one in the wheelchair, thank you. The wheelchair, yes. All right, this woman in the wheelchair, it's not as large to see. I know her personally. This is my friend Cecilia Losi in Omaha, Nebraska. She and I were YOU sponsors together when our kids were going through high school. Cecilia is in a wheelchair because of post-polio. When she was a child, polio withered her legs. This is a picture, so if you just saw Cecilia or someone else in a wheelchair, it's very, very easy to focus on the outside of Cecilia and to see, oh, really, again, just like with Dr. Hawking, to feel sorry for her. But this is Cecilia in her Zumba class, everybody. So I'm just going to say to you, no excuses. No excuses, right? Cecilia is one of the most amazing women. The YOU people used to just call her joyfully the wheelchair lady. Here's the wheelchair lady. She danced universal dances of peace by spinning in her wheelchair and grabbing the hands of the other kids. This woman is unstoppable. I watched her pick up her grandchild Like a stork holds a baby, she wrapped up with one hand the blanket in a big, a foil thing like this, and she picked her up with one arm and plopped her down on her lap to try to change the diaper. She uses her teeth and whatever she has available to be able to do things. Unstoppable woman. But if you didn't see the within of her, you didn't see the gifts that she's bringing to her family and to the world around her, you'd have no idea of the light that she is. All right, this third one is the most personal to me. So 9 years after my father renounced me, he had a spiritual awakening. He had a healing, a full healing. And I'll tell you what, before then, it was so difficult that if I would phone, my parents are still married. They're 85 years old now, but when I would call home, my first home, if my father answered the phone, he'd hang the phone up on me. So it was so bad that when my maternal grandmother died and I went home for the funeral, when I walked in the funeral home in one door, my father saw me and he walked out the back door. So that's how it had been. So for this man, who I could have seen the outside of him as just this intolerant bigot, I could have done that. But I refused to believe that was the truth of him. I really did. I insisted on it for 9 long years. When I would sit in meditations, I would do everything I could to take the crust off of him, to see the truth of this man. And here he is just 2 Christmases ago, the former electrician who lights up Christmas for everybody around him. He puts lights on his Santa hat and on his walker, and he goes into restaurants and sings ho, ho, ho. I mean, this is my father, Carmen Martella, who reconciled with me after 9 years, one of the most courageous acts that he could do after being raised to feel very afraid of people who didn't look like him. So, all of this to just say, every one of us has crazy stuff in our lives. We all have decisions to make moment by moment of who we are going to be and how we're going to behave. And there's just no fun in just being the good girl. There's some room for divine audacity. There's some room for us to cultivate a way of being that makes the world better, that gives a gift to those others in our life. I just have to tell you that as hard as it was to go through the decisions that I made that I knew was going to rock my parents' world in those years, and those are only some of the things, guys, that as much as that was painful and difficult, I look at my parents today, I look at my children today, I look at my life today, and I say everybody who is involved in those things is better today because I dared. Because I stood as an audacious spiritual being, knowing what I'm about, and I made a choice. And I celebrate every choice that you decide to, from that place of knowing. So I'm going to say these words again before we meditate, and I'm going to ask you, let's listen to them first. Today, I will accept the truth about myself. I will arise in glory and allow the light in me to shine upon the world today. Will you repeat after me? Today I will accept the truth about myself. Together? Today I will accept the truth about myself. I will arise in glory and allow the light in me to shine upon the world today. Again, can you say it with me? Today I will accept the truth about myself, yes. I will arise in glory and allow the light in me to shine upon the world today. Yes, let's meditate. So take that deep, deep, deep. Just take it inside and breathe now. Deeply breathe. Deeply breathe. Relax your belly and open your lungs as you draw your breath. Intentionally, fully inflate your lungs and breathe out with a long, deep sigh. And again, breathe. Exhale. As you let your body breathe naturally now, just imagine the sparkle on the inside of you. It's independent of your thoughts and feelings. The light of divine life, love, wisdom, strength, power, order, zeal, release, life, faith. It's all there. We don't need to acquire it. We don't need to work hard to earn it. All that God is, we are. We are filled, overflowing with Godness. In your imagination, which is also one of your spiritual capacities, just take an eraser and run that eraser along the edges of your body in your mind, sort of blurring the hard edges. And feel the you of you sort of spill out from those borders into the atmosphere around you. And this is the way it really is. We are pure Godness. Wherever we are, Godness is. We might be hearing our own brains sort of arguing against this right now, and I'm going to ask us to just say, I agree. Say it in your own heart. I agree. I am willing. I'm willing to admit my divine identity. Hush the arguing. I admit I am divine. And at the very affirmation, the cells in my body are dancing in joyful life. My body's in agreement. I am divine. I agree. I agree. And I sit in the awe of silence, divine.